Welcome to Esoteric Thoughts. Today I have the great pleasure of welcoming Ralph Ellis back to the channel. How are you, Ralph?
Very, very well. Thanks, Esoteric. Yeah, going well.
And today Ralph's going to be talking to us about Joseph and his conversation with the Pharaoh.
Yes, we were discussing recently astrotheology because there's a lot of people out there, my detractors included, who don't believe that there is any astrotheology within the biblical text. I think there's a great deal of it, mostly connected with the precession of the equinox, which we've discussed before, that you can date things by the constellation that they arrive under. So the constellations we're looking at are Taurus, which runs from about, this is the great month of Taurus, processionally, and it runs from about 4,500 BC to 1750 BC. Then we run into Aries, which runs from 1750 BC to about turn of the first millennium, AD 10, something of that nature. And then we go into the great month of Pisces from AD 10 onwards, all the way up. I make it until about 2350 AD. So we've still got another 300 or more years to go before we start going into Aquarius. But you can date events by that, by mentioning the great month they happened under. You can date monarchs, and monarchs can identify themselves with each great month, which we've seen before. You know, Alexander the Great wearing the horns of a ram, Jesus becoming, a Lamb of God, becoming a fisher of men, going from Aries to Pisces. We've discussed that. And so I think that they did understand a lot of astrotheology. They understood the precession of the equinox, and they used it within the biblical text. So the one we're going to look at is Joseph, him of the coat of many colors from the Old Testament, and his account within Genesis. And this comes from originally this comes from my Jesus Last of the Pharaohs, which I've not showed this before, but this is interesting. This is the book it comes from. You can read on the front, it says Hing Pang Pang Cheshong, which is the Chinese edition of Jesus Last of the Pharaohs. And they made a very good edition of it. It's only a paperback, but you can see in the middle, it says Jesus Last of the Pharaohs. And all of my books have been published in China. So some of my detractors are big in their mother's back bedroom, but I'm big in China. So yeah, all of my books are published in China. So yeah, this was going back a long way, this one. This is 1990s, I wrote this one. And one of the observations I made was this discussion between Joseph and Pharaoh. And the Torah is annoying. I was just going to pull up a little, let me just type in Pharaoh. Oh, no, I did New Testament, not Old Testament. Let me do Old Testament. So on numerous occasions, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, nearly 10 pages of verses within the Old Testament that mention Pharaoh. And for the vast majority of those mentions of Pharaoh, they don't say which Pharaoh it was, which is hugely annoying. It just says Pharaoh, and you think, oh, come on. you knew exactly which Pharaoh this was, you know. Why have you deleted the name of the Pharaoh? Well, because they didn't want you to know necessarily the era in which this was happening. And sometimes they didn't want you to know the Pharaoh involved, because sometimes that Pharaoh was their own Pharaoh. I think we've talked about this before, where Moses and Aaron might well have been Akhenaten and his brother Moses, because um, the brother of Akhenaten was called Moses. So there's many reasons why they might not have mentioned the name of the Pharaoh involved, but it is truly annoying, because we could have deciphered a lot of this much easier if we had known which Pharaoh he was speaking to. But anyway, Joseph, him of the coat of many colors, goes down into Egypt and becomes the prime minister of Egypt. So he comes second only to Pharaoh. So he becomes very important, which is interesting because, well, he would have spoken fluent Egyptian, of course. He would have to in order to be a prime minister. He would have known and understood all of the culture and customs and gods of the Egyptians. He would have to be in order to be the prime minister of Egypt. And it's likely that he was, you know, fully Egyptianized himself in order to be the prime minister of Egypt. So that's all interesting to start with. And then he goes to Pharaoh because he wants his family to come down into Egypt. And he says to Pharaoh, my brethren and my father's house have come unto me. This is Genesis 47, 31, it starts. And then he observes, but the men, his brothers, are shepherds, for their trade has been to feed the cattle. And they have brought their flocks and their herds and all that they have. And then he advises his brothers. He says, Pharaoh will call you and say, what is your occupation? And you will say to him, my servant's trade has been about cattle from our youth even to now, both we and also our fathers, that you may dwell in the land of Goshen in Egypt. For every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians, which doesn't make any sense, because, you know, there was no taboo against eating sheep meat in Egypt. If anything, it would be the other way around. It would be like in modern India, where the eating of beef would be more of a problem because of the, you know, the Apis bull and the worship of the Apis bull. So he's advising them not to say that they are shepherds, and rather instead to say they are cattle breeders. It makes no sense whatsoever in agricultural terms, which is how this verse is always interpreted. It's interpreted in agricultural terms because this is how they interpret everything within the Old Testament. You know, when the patriarchs are called shepherds, they are just shepherds looking after flocks of half-starving sheep. That's the only way that the establishment can interpret this. But of course, they weren't. When they were talking about shepherds, they were talking about the Hyksos, the shepherd pharaohs of Egypt. And the only thing you need to do to understand that is put this story a little bit further back in the past, by about another 400 years roughly, and understand that the patriarchs were more powerful people than is being made out. But then we know that because if you read the equivalent story by Josephus Flavius, about Abraham. So within the biblical story, it says that Abraham had 317 servants, I think it was, if I remember correctly. So Abraham had 317 servants working for him. And you think, well, okay, that's a bit more than a shepherd, really. 317 servants. So, I mean, that makes him quite powerful to have that number of people in his household. But no, if you read Josephus Flavius, who gives the same story, Josephus says that Abraham had 317 army officers. Now, that's a different story, because if each one of those army officers was a centurion, then he had a standing army of 30,000 men. Now, there's only one group of people in this era that had a standing army of that nature, and that's the Hyksos shepherd kings. And that's why these people were called shepherds. Nothing to do with agriculture. It was all to do with the Hyksos shepherd pharaohs of Egypt, who are a people who took over northern Egypt, lower Egypt, from about, it's something like 2100 BC up until about 1600 BC, when they were kicked out on a great exodus. We've talked about this before. So, okay, so if we're not talking agriculture and we're talking instead about the Hyksos, perhaps we're also talking about astrotheology here. Why were the Hyksos called the Hyksos? Why were the shepherd pharaohs? Well, it so happens that in about 1750 BC, the great month of Taurus turned into the great month of Aries. The bulls turned into sheep. And I think this is why the Hyksos were known as the shepherd kings, because they were the followers of Aries, when the other people, the establishment obviously split at this stage. The other people were still worshipping the Apis bull, Taurus. And so we have this division within the lands of Egypt. And we had a complete division between north and south. And we had a civil war which erupted. And I think a lot of this civil war was more religious, astrological. It said it was ethnic because, the Hyksos were supposed to have come down from Mesopotamia and so on. Therefore, they weren't proper Egyptians, even though they were fully Egyptianized. I think this dispute had more to do with theology than it did with ethnicity. And I think Joseph, as Prime Minister of Egypt, is talking about the same thing. So this would be after the great Hyksos exodus out of Egypt, which I call the Hyksos Israelite exodus out of Egypt, because Josephus Flavius says that the Hyksos were our forefathers. Now, Josephus is supposed to be, the greatest historian within Judaism. And he specifically says in his book, Against Apion, he says that the Hyksos pharaohs of Egypt and the Hyksos people were our forefathers. He is saying the Israelites were the Hyksos. This is something we tried to put into Wiki some years ago, quite a few years ago now, 7 years ago or something like that. And it was banned. We weren't allowed to put it in because in Wiki we have gatekeepers, and if those gatekeepers have an agenda, we've all seen this agenda-driven, dare I say, wokeism, which has infected many portions of, California and the tech industry. It's in Wiki as well. And we were not allowed to put this into Wiki. It was just deleted time and time again. We had 3 months of arguments. And the end result was we were both banned from Wiki. We were accused of vandalism on the site we were trying to put it in. All we wanted to do was put in a single quote from Josephus. That's all we were trying to put in. A 2-line quote from Josephus where he says that the Hyksos pharaohs of Egypt were the forefathers of the Israelites, and it was banned. I think it's in there now. I'm not quite sure. You'll have to look it up. This was on the Exodus page. See if it's actually stayed there, because various people, I can't mention who, but various people came back in under pseudonyms to re-put that sentence back into that page. I think it's stuck there now. I'm not sure. I've not checked it recently. But anyway, you're not allowed to talk about these sort of things. So we were talking about Joseph, and Joseph says, you must say that your trade has been about cattle from your youth until now, in order that you may dwell in the land of Egypt. For every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. This was after the Hyksos exodus out of Egypt. And these people are coming back into Egypt. That's the whole story of, Joseph coming back into Egypt, and his brethren now coming back into Egypt after the first great Hyksos exodus. And so, of course, he's talking about cattle and sheep, but nothing to do with agriculture. This is all to do with theology, the precession of the equinox, and the nature of the Hyksos people. So what he's actually saying is, well, just replace cattle with Taurus and sheep with Aries, and you know exactly what he's talking about. So what he's saying is, Joseph is warning his brothers, and he will say, Pharaoh will call you, and he will say, what is your religion? Not occupation. What is your religion? And you shall say to him, my servant's trade has been about Taurus from our youth even to now, both we and also our forefathers, that you may dwell in the land of Egypt. For every venerator of Aries, the Hyksos, are an abomination to the Egyptians. Well, of course, the Hyksos were an abomination to the Egyptians because they just had a mighty civil war with them, and they'd been kicked out of Egypt only, 300 years before, whatever. So, yes, this is about a different group of people, the Hyksos, but it's also about religion, the difference between those who still venerated the Apis bull and those who venerated Aries, the lamb, the shepherds. Because they're talking about the great months within the precession of the equinox. The great month of Taurus ended in 1750 BC. The great month of Aries started in 1750 BC. They were in the great month of Aries. They should have all been shepherds, but they weren't, because some people were hanging on to their previous beliefs and they were still connecting themselves with Taurus and the Apis bull, and that was the dispute that they were having, and that's the dispute that Joseph is talking about. Nothing to do with agriculture. It's to do with religion, the great months of precession, and the split, the religious split that had been engendered by this change in the heavens above, which had split the people between Taurus and Aries. And I think this might be part of the reason why Akhenaten later on, because he wasn't until the 1320s BC, why he banished the images of animals. He became the first monotheist, the iconoclast, tearing out the images of animals. Why? Possibly because this had caused so much dispute in previous centuries. So perhaps the easiest way to get rid of these disputes is to stop having these images of animals and just say there is only one God with no particular image, and then we won't have another civil war the next time this happens, when Aries turns into Pisces. But of course, that didn't happen because they had a civil war anyway. It's called the Jewish Revolt. So they did have a civil war when Aries turned into Pisces. But I think that might be the reason why he invented monotheism and destroyed the images of animals. So, yeah, that is my first take, which I wrote about in the 1990s about astrotheology within the Bible. It's there if you can see it, if you can decipher it. And the easy way of deciphering this is just to understand that most of these religions, including Judaism, including Christianity, are closely related to astrotheology, to the study of the heavens, the study of the cosmos, the movements of the planets and the various bodies in the heavens above. That was the original religion. And of course, Judaism and Christianity have elements of that which have crept into their religion because that was the original religion. And they're still there today if you can decipher them.
Ralph, thank you for joining us on Esoteric Thoughts.